I think it's no secret that I'm not a big fan of sequels when it comes to Disney for the most part, either from them obviously, and to some extent most of Pixar's outside of Toy Story itself. But in recent times, especially with the teaser of Inside Out 2 coming out, I've gotten to thinking otherwise. Because for the most part, Pixar hasn't been in the greatest of places recently, being under the shadow of Disney's failures in the year of their 100th anniversary, with the fact that their movies were released on Disney Plus earlier and then bombed in theaters until Elemental actually slowly recovered over time with the reception of a good story. For the most part, Pixar as a studio, when they are allowed to create and properly shine under good Disney management, will always be able to succeed, at least in my opinion, if the stories are actually there. Because when Inside Out was released, it was a bit of fresh air for the studio after some of their films at the time didn't match the same level of consistency as their golden age, falling out at the start with Cars 2 and then Brave that was mismanaged, followed by Monsters University beginning as an underrated prequel with just another good original film before they decided to dip their toes back into sequels with Dory, which was alright, and then the painfully mediocre Incredibles 2 and so forth. And the main reason I wanted to talk about this today is of course the new strategy going forward with Disney and their studios after the strikes has officially ended, where films like this were announced last year and also combined with the fact that other Disney sequels were announced earlier like Toy Story, Frozen, and so forth, which has me greatly concerned. Not learning anything new from the beginning and just adding to what they already have after everything this year is falling flat, including their own original films and remakes. This news also comes after the fact that over the course of the weeks before the actors' strike officially ended, they delayed several other films like Elio that was supposed to come out in March of 2024, and of course the horrendous Snow White remake delayed to 2025 instead, something that shows that they're not willing to learn their lessons at all right now. And although I hate the fact that we don't get to see another original Pixar film after Elemental that surprised all of us to a degree, I actually accept it for what it is, with the idea Inside Out 2 actually introduces, something that I think actually works. I mean, this film isn't out yet obviously, and I'm just talking this off the back of the teaser that's being released right now, but I just really believe in the world of Inside Out since it is one of the best Pixar films ever made in recent times. And yes, this is still my personal belief and not because of the fact that others have said the same thing, all because of what has happened recently with Elemental that most of you already know by now with how much I actually adore it. A growth none of us actually expected, but an actual welcome one. Because thinking about it more and more with the style that both Elemental and Inside Out 2 has, it actually makes perfect sense to why this film would follow it up and actually generate more, considering the fact before this, Inside Out was one of the highest grossing Pixar movies in countries like South Korea before Elemental actually took that over because of the elements that the film actually connected with them. So to follow it up with something like this that actually generated buzz in those countries before actually makes complete sense and really creates more buzz for the entire studio once again. I mean, it would have already had buzz because of the fact it is a sequel, which Pixar has been very good at doing, attracting audiences to watch for, making over $1 billion each, but I think this film specifically is giving more of a reason to actually watch it for its story and expanding the characters we already know. Because when we think of Pixar, we do think of attaching human emotions to our stories because of the if X were like Y formula, where this one really took that personally inside our own heads and the variety of personalities that makes us a human, depending on how we feel, and how a sequel and what has been seen thus far with these concepts can actually expand that even more with the basic essence that we knew. Where the production of the movie listed to utilize truthful world building, the new director Kelsey Mann used Pete Docter's 5 to 27 emotions idea from the first film he pitched to build this new world. So what this film is actually attempting to do is expanding upon the ideas originally presented for the first Inside Out film and now properly utilizing it in a way for a sequel, with our new emotions and anxiety added, which is honestly one of the best ideas I could ever think of if you think of it. What we associate our anxieties with in new situations and of course with new movies with, the anticipation of events with of course the ending line in the teaser having them say we, once again referring to that 5 to 27 emotions idea in the room, adding 4 new characters to expand as someone actually grows up. And when you think of that, in a way, it actually kind of feels similar to what Toy Story 2 provided us with this world that it was expanded upon. Not saying that this film would actually be like it depending on what happens, but you get what I mean with what this movie has to say with a great idea that adds to its story, remembering the same thing they did by adding characters like Jesse and Bullseye to the group that were so beloved as their counterparts to Woody and Buzz. Just like what anxiety could do to be in a way to fear, as that feeling is associated with that other emotion, and another challenge Joy would have to face with Riley entering her teenage years as a 13-year-old. Because looking back on the first story, the journey we took with Joy was just very sweet, learning to accept sadness as an important emotion for Riley that actually helped them to grow up, how we can all come together despite our differences in those ways to actually make one person feel better in the journey of their life. It just becomes a more powerful form of storytelling the more you actually think about it, and I absolutely cannot wait for where this one would actually be headed, enjoying where Pixar usually takes their more colorful designs of the Inside Out world more than the static realism others like Lightyear tried and obviously failed at, shining the most when they can actually tell something that elicits more feeling in a cartoonish fashion, remembering some of the actual wackiness of the original film that has been already provided, and of course what happened in Elemental with its unique design. But this doesn't mean I have to give this movie all of the praises just because I've been happy with this work compared to Disney as a whole, where it still has once again represented a larger issue going on with the sequels and what has happened behind the scenes. Because the truth still remains that some of the voice actors of the first film, like Bill Hader and Mindy Kaling, are not coming back for this film because of pay disputes, something that still happened well before the strikes, mind you, and not that I enjoy any of the works Mindy has actually produced recently, but more towards the consistency of voices that we already know, and the treatment that some deserve better, as Amy Poehler actually got an offer of $5 million plus to actually reprise her role, while the others only got reportedly offered $100,000 each, only 2% of Joy's over here. But overall, it still won't affect the story as much, as they do have talented voice actors who can play the characters, which most wouldn't mind, especially kids who just watch these, but still a major problem that Disney has had to deal with after Bob's statements earlier in this year when the strikes were actually going on and lasted all the way up to this point, thanks to his own stubbornness. And mark my words, one day I will get his position, I promise you that. But beyond that, considering what has happened, I think Disney will at least support this movie more, as it is obviously a sequel at first, and at least trying to give it more time as they have done for Elemental, which exploded in popularity on Disney Plus over time for the sake of theaters. A business that I believe is still important as in keeping the heart of the movie-going experience, and films that totally deserve such a treatment more than they tried to in 2022, shafting Turning Red and releasing Lightyear. Just a better strategy, so they should actually promote the stories that did work for them in the first place over the course of time, beginning all those years ago. And I just truly feel like this is a sequel that can be like Dory at the very least, and Toy Story 2 at the very best. A boldly positive statement, but only because I believe in this world more and more, where if it truly does that, then we can set a better path forward for other films like Elio in the future for Pixar, compared to had it actually been released in March and then having this film in June, where the last time Pixar released 2 movies in the same year, it kinda sucked the energy compared to the other one, like Cars 3 and Coco, and especially Inside Out and The Good Dinosaur. Just focusing on one project at a time at this current moment for the entire company is just good enough to satisfy plenty at this point, where they do feel tired of all the crap they have been doing. But the most important thing to note about this entire situation is that it must not turn into a situation where Disney greenlights 10 more sequels, reaching the point where we still have Toy Story 5 on our hands. As I pointed out earlier, that is not a good idea. I mean, it still could work because it is Pixar and its surprising quality of Toy Story 4, which is a very good story, but then again, it still had to take away things to make that story overall work, reminding us that there are certain limits when it comes to stories and the sequels that can spawn out of it. And Inside Out could actually turn to be no different, where I don't want it to be successful enough that Disney starts going haywire alongside what could be done, which still, to be frank, has more ways to go considering that there are 27 distinct emotions that we have and that Riley can actually grow up, that there is much more to do because we stick to one person and their multitudes of emotion compared to how the arc we ended up with Andy before and moving on to Bonnie, which can eventually move back and forth and ruin the third film even more if you get what I'm saying. But if it does work quite well, then I still would actually remain open to a third film for this particular franchise compared to say like Frozen 3, which kind of didn't know where the hell it was actually going at all because that's still Disney. But of course, going along with that concept and with Riley actually growing up and becoming a teenager, it kind of works to the point where she becomes an adult in the world that we all grow up and know. The kind of journey we take with Pixar as our youth when we were children, and now to the point where people like me are young adults. And with what I hear, this is just a great step forward for the studio, representing more people who deal with anxiety in daily life, capturing the next step in our never-ending journey of life from our birth to our death. Not that I really actually want them to go all the way up there, but still an interesting progression that makes the world building of the story cohesive to its natural course. And to close things out, I just truly feel joyful about the future of Pixar at this point with the steps taken with Inside Out, and cannot wait until it actually does. And with that all said, I'm all done, so goodbye.